Part 2. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 11. The big dog rushed up, shaking his head, and hugged Zuyun in his arms. I miss you so much. I heard about the 5 spiritual roots in the inner sect, and I'm afraid you will be driven home. Ergu waved his pigtails and hugged him. Me too. The 3 of them hugged each other for a while, then Zuyun let go of the 2 and smiled. No way. My master is so kind to me. He just won't let me practice my sword. Don't let you practice, Big Dog asked strangely. We in Lingjian sect don't practice swords, so why do we practice? Did he trick you into staying and working in vain? Ergu said, I've heard that the 7th uncle doesn't have much ability, he just makes alchemy, weapons, and farming. Farming. Zuyun was secretly amused, that was a magical medicine. At this time, the big dog looked around cautiously. When he saw that no one was paying attention, he quickly took out a porcelain bottle and stuffed it into Zuyun's hand. Xiaozu, this is the Huanglong pill I saved. When you finish eating it, you will definitely be able to break through. It's time to refining energy. Before he finished speaking, he saw Ergu also taking out a porcelain bottle. I am the same, but this is the Heki pill. Zuyun was slightly stunned and moved in his heart, but he still rejected the 2 people's kindness. Xiaozu, my master gave me a big bottle. I took a few pills and I'll be in the qi refining stage. Don't worry, take it. We came from Barren Rock Mountain together and we should help each other. Me too. Xiaozu, hurry up and accept it, I'm not short of elixirs now. Zuyun shook his head and said, you guys, just keep improving your cultivation. It doesn't matter to me. Besides, my master knows how to make elixirs. Do you think I will be short of elixirs? The big dog said with a look of disdain, stop bragging. I asked my master specifically. The elixirs that the 7th uncle made were all taken from the sex elixirs. How many elixirs can be used to make as many elixirs, even if it's a useless elixir, so I have to hand it over. When they first started, Zhang Tianyuan did not shy away from them and directly took them to the 7th master uncle. The 2 of them paid more attention, and when they were selected as disciples by the elders of the sect, they often asked about the 7th uncle and the 5 spiritual roots. Ergu also said, yes, I also asked. My master said that this is where Uncle 7th Master works. It is those disciples who have no experience and call him Uncle Master. Zuyun couldn't help but widen his eyes after hearing what these 2 people said. No, at that time I clearly heard Elder Mu say that the valley can be self-sufficient. Moreover, there are also Bigugu fulling pills and so on in the valley. Zuyun was puzzled and suddenly thought that the master must be hiding something from him. And the strangest thing is that he is not allowed to practice swordsmanship. With full of doubts, the 3 of them walked to a stone tablet with the 3 characters mesmerized sword cliff engraved on it. The big dog only remembered at this moment and said, Xiaozu, didn't you say that your master won't let you practice swordsmanship? What are you doing here at Sword Confusion Cliff? Ergu also looked at Zuyun curiously, wanting to know why Zuyun was here. Zuyun didn't mean to hide it, but thinking that the 2 people didn't think highly of Sun Suanhua, and it was inconvenient to explain, he simply said, Master asked me to do something. Let me tell you, your master made you do hard work. The big dog curled his lips and wanted to persuade Zuyun not to do it. But he also thought that if he quit, Zuyun would probably be driven back to Barren Rock Mountain. It's better to stay here so that you can take care of yourself. Okay, we 2 are going up the mountain. If you need anything, come to Lingjian Peak to find me. Tell me my name and take care of me. Me too, I'm at Lingmyo Peak. The big dog patted his chest, took the 2 dogs and said goodbye to Zuyun. After they walked away, Zuyun's smile faded. Master is very strange, it seems that he still needs to pay attention. But at this time, it seems that he wants me to learn his skills even more, so I can't let him know that he is pregnant with a treasure. With this in mind, Zuyun also became cautious, found a trail that seemed to have fewer footprints, and walked along it. The terrain of Magian Cliff is as steep as the lower part of Barren Rock Mountain, with no vegetation. Some are just strange scales and strange rocks, and the strange rocks look like stone swords stuck upside down in the mountains. The tip of the sword is extremely sharp, and if you are not careful, you may get a wound. Master is indeed right, this kind of place is the most suitable for practicing body skills. Zuyun couldn't help but smile bitterly, and then concentrated on walking. Little did he know that behind him, there were several chi refining cultivators following from a distance. My wish came true. That boy actually walked to the bottom of the cliff alone. He, I saw with my own eyes Mangbeishi, the disciple of the leader, gave him a bottle of elixir. I also saw Zhou Huanghua give him a bottle. If we rob this boy, we will make a fortune. There were 3 people in the group with greedy eyes. They are all minor cultivators with ordinary talents, similar to Zhang Tianyuan. They perform tasks for the sect in exchange for cultivation resources. There is no treatment like a big dog and 2 dogs. When those 2 people entered the sect, there was a huge uproar in the sect, and no one knew about it. One was appointed as an inner disciple by the head, and the other was snatched away by Elder Mu. This time, these 3 people came here with the intention of going to the Misty Sword Cliff to practice before facing the sect competition. However, they did not expect that they happened to see Zuyun and the others reminiscing about old times. As for the strength of Zuyun's spiritual power, he was only at the first level of chi refining at most, and evil thoughts arose in his heart. Zuyun is not strong and has little experience. He does not know that he is being followed. After walking for a while and making sure that no one was walking on this road, they entered the space in the mirror with a thought. A moment later, the 3 of them found this place and looked around, but there was no trace. Strange, that kid just disappeared. The leading young cultivator in green said. Another blue-robed cultivator frowned and said, as far as I know, there was another disciple with 5 spiritual roots who came in with Mangbeishi and the others, but that kid was taken into the valley by Uncle 7. Could it be that he learned some formation? It's possible. Uncle 7 is good at unorthodox methods, this is really possible. This kid might be hiding. The last white-robed cultivator said with a gloomy face. In that case, let's wait aside. I don't believe this kid can hide until dark. The young cultivator in green laughed grimly, and the other 2 agreed and hid aside. Zuyun didn't know what was happening in the outside world. At this time, he took the talisman to learn how to draw the fireball talisman. On the stone table, there was a stack of talisman paper, a plate of cinnabar, and a talisman pen. His memory was only good at first, but now that he became a cultivator, he could read 10 lines at a glance. The book said that there were 2 ways to draw talismans. One was to directly use a spiritual pen dipped in cinnabar to draw the talisman pattern on the talisman paper, and then fill it with spiritual power. The other was to concentrate spiritual power on the talisman pen when drawing. Both had their pros and cons. The first method had an extra step, but it was safer. If you made a mistake, it would not matter. It was suitable for novices like Zuyun. The second method was efficient but dangerous. If there was a mistake in the process of drawing the talisman would be scrapped at best, and exploded on the spot at worst. Zuyun touched his head and thought that drawing talismans was not something that ordinary people could do. No wonder the master couldn't accept any disciples. Zuyun didn't rush to write, but stretched out his fingers to draw in the air. After drawing for a while, he had roughly memorized the direction of the talisman pattern. The talisman pattern was not a straight line. It can even be said that these runes are simply composed of some strokes of characters. He could only follow the book to draw the curved head and vertical needle. Zuyun remembered the fireball rune until his feet were numb from squatting. The incense and candles that he lit when he came in had burned a quarter of it. This meant that 3 hours had passed, and he once again lamented that time was not a factor in cultivating immortals. Even drawing runes took him so long to learn. Is the talent of the 5 spiritual roots really that bad? After stretching, Zuyun perked up and picked up the rune pen. After dipping it in cinnabar, it fell on the rune paper. He chose the first way, drawing the rune first, and then charging spiritual power into it. After a moment, Zuyun put away his pen. The rune in front of him suddenly flashed a flash of fire, and then it was instantly submerged in it. The rune is done. Zuyun was so excited that he couldn't help but waved his fist, and his little face flushed. Then the next step was to charge the rune with spirit. He turned to the introduction to the talisman, read it carefully several times, and after remembering the precautions, he placed his hand on the talisman head. To fill the spiritual power, you must start from the talisman head, and then use your hand as a medium to transfer the spiritual power to the talisman. When he was about to drive the spiritual power in Danshan, a thought suddenly flashed through Zuyun's mind. When I used the sword energy to release it, I used the gold spiritual power, and it produced such a great effect. What if I use the fire spiritual power for this fireball talisman? Thinking of this, Zuyun immediately looked inside his Danshan, but was stunned in an instant. I used up the gold spiritual power yesterday, and I didn't practice at all. How come I have the same amount of spiritual power as the other 4 systems now? I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 12. Zuyun couldn't figure out the reason. Looking carefully, he could see that the spiritual power of the other 4 elements was not full. But from yesterday till now, he had not found any abnormality in his Danshan. After pondering for a moment, he decided to fill the fireball talisman with spiritual power first. After the spiritual power was filled, he would see if the fire spiritual power would reach a balanced state like the gold spiritual power. Zuyun withdrew his consciousness and began to control the fire spiritual power in his Danshan and guide it to the fireball talisman. At this time, Zuyun realized that his spiritual power, although it looked a lot, was not enough. Because all the fire spiritual power was only enough for Zuyun to fill 1 fireball talisman. But despite this, Zuyun was also very fortunate. If it was not full of spiritual power and it was exhausted, then the fireball talisman would be useless. Although Zuyun could draw a talisman at any time. But the spiritual power that was finally refined was wasted. He touched the ordinary fireball talisman, but kept it close to his body as if he had found a treasure. Even if the master does not allow me to practice sword, I have a way to protect myself. Zuyun was happy for a while, and then he focused all his attention on the Danshan. And just a short while later, he found that the fire spiritual power that was almost exhausted actually increased a little. Strange, I obviously did not practice. Why is this fire spiritual power still increasing? Zuyun whispered carefully, staring at the entire Danshan with full concentration. The fire spiritual power is still increasing. Could it be that my body has learned to absorb and refine spiritual power on its own? Impossible. Zuyun was puzzled, so he looked at the other spiritual powers, and then he found that the 4 systems of gold, wood, water, and earth were actually less. Like the Danshan of the 5-color turntable, the vacant fire system is slowly increasing. But the other 4 systems are decreasing. What does this mean? Is the attribute of the spiritual power changing? Zuyun suddenly realized it. The 5 elements are mutually reinforcing and mutually restraining, and they complement each other and lack each other. Fire restrains wood, but wood generates fire. Part of the wood spiritual power is converted into fire spiritual power, and then the earth spiritual power converts the wood spiritual power. And so on. The 5 spiritual powers can be freely converted. Moreover, there is no need to control it by yourself. It is the same as the gold spiritual power yesterday. I understand, I understand. Zuyun suddenly realized that he had only practiced according to the Qi refining method in the Five Elements Chaos Sutra and did not pay too much attention to the relationship between the five elements. Or, he knew the five elements, so he ignored the Qi. And at this moment, he completely understood. Although, he needs to absorb 5 times the spiritual power of others like the other 5 spiritual roots. But he can use the absorbed spiritual power completely. In other words, there is no waste at all. Twice the effort for half the result. Not true. I am twice the effort for twice the result. Thinking of this, Zuyun's mind was clear, and the sound of broken glass appeared in his mind. Kaka. The bottleneck was broken. Instantly, the Danshan accelerated its rotation, and the conversion between spiritual powers became faster. The fire spiritual power increased at a speed visible to the naked eye. Originally, it might take several hours to reach a balanced state. At this time, it only took a cup of tea, and the 5 colors were already equal. And the 5-color turntable has also become more than half larger. Breakthrough. The second level of Qi refining. Zuyun couldn't believe it. I just realized a little bit of the 5 Elements Chaos Sutra, and there would be such a change. Is this the difficult part of the 5 spiritual roots? Thinking of this, Zuyun's mouth flashed a little excited. Master, Master, didn't you say that the further you practice, the harder it is? I'm already in the second level of Qi refining. See what you have to say then. After being happy, Zuyun also calmed down. Others have made great progress in strength at the second level of Qi refining. And I, except for drawing talismans, I'm afraid there is no other means. So, I still have to draw talismans. He collected his thoughts and started to draw talismans again. However, after drawing one, he was not in a hurry to recharge his spirit. Although the space in his danshan had become larger, he did not practice, so his spiritual power did not increase. After drawing a whole dozen talisman papers, Zuyun put away the cinnabar and talisman pen. Counting carefully, there were 11 pieces. Including the one on his body, there were 12 in total. Just right, 4 for Dago and Ergo, and I will keep 4 for myself. Zuyun spread these semi-finished fireball talismans on the table one by one, and began to absorb spiritual energy and refine them. When the spiritual power of the entire danshan was filled again, the incense and candles on the ground had burned out and became cold. The speed of cultivation is still as slow. Zuyun sighed. They talked about it on the way here. It only takes half an hour for Dago to fill the spiritual power of the danshan at one time. Ergo was a little slower, but it was only an hour. But it took me most of the day, right? Never mind, we have different ways of cultivation. Zuyun was optimistic by nature, and he figured it out in an instant. After lighting another incense stick, he picked up a fireball talisman and started to recharge his spirit. After recharging the spirit, Zuyun looked at it and found that the fire spirit power was not exhausted, while the spirit power of the other several systems was replenished in a cycle. He calculated that a fireball talisman only needed more than 10% of the spirit power. After using up his spiritual power, he practiced once more, and he could almost fill up all the remaining fireball talismans. He did it right away. When his spiritual power was exhausted, he absorbed it again until it was full. Finally, when the incense and candles burned out, all 11 fireball talismans on the table were completed. I've been here for 2 days. It's almost dark outside, right? Zuyun calculated the time and was shocked. He put all the fireball talismans on the stone table into his arms and left the space in the mirror. Sure enough. The sun was setting in the west, the sky was getting dark, and the clusters of stone swords around him became a little weird and creepy. The mountain wind blew, and a humming sound was heard, which was chilling. Zuyun subconsciously clasped a fireball talisman in his hand. Just at this moment, several figures suddenly flashed by. 3 figures of blue, white, and blue blocked him with swords. Ha ha ha, kid, you finally came out. The blue-clothed cultivator thrust his sword forward and said with a grim smile. Zuyun took a step back and thought to himself that it was not good. Did this person find out that he had come out of the Dao glass mirror? Want to hide? Seeing this, the white-robed monk thought that Zuyun wanted to escape. He moved slightly and stopped behind Zuyun the next moment, saying with disdain, "You are only at the 2nd level of chi refining, and you are worthy of so many pills? Hand over the reality point, and we will leave you a whole body." Hearing this, Zuyun breathed a sigh of relief, but tensed up again in an instant. It turned out that they were not here for the Dao glass mirror, but pills. After being puzzled, Zuyun understood again. He had never seen these 3 people before. Presumably they didn't know him either. If it was for the pills, it must be because they found the scene where Daegu and Ergu were going to give him the pills. But he actually wanted to kill him for this? And he was still in the sect. Suddenly, Zuyun thought of Zhang Tianyuan's death from alcohol. A nameless anger suddenly rose. But he also knew that this was not the time to show off his strength. 1 against 3, and the strength of these 3 people was far above his own. In fact, since they dared to attack, it must be because he chose this rarely traveled downhill road. Boy, did you hear that? It's a death sentence anyway. If you give me the pill, I'll let you choose a comfortable way to die. Seeing Zuyun not moving for a long time, another green-clothed cultivator shouted sternly. Zuyun was afraid that after entering the Daoliuli mirror, the fragments would be left here and picked up. But a head-on confrontation was obviously not a good choice. After thinking quickly in his mind, he stretched his empty left hand into his arms. At the same time, he pretended to be afraid on his face, begging for mercy, and took out the gift from Sun Suanhua, a porcelain bottle containing the fulling pill. Seeing this, the 3 cultivators showed greed in their eyes, put away their swords, and approached with a grin. However, Zuyun suddenly threw the porcelain bottle at the blue-clothed cultivator in front of him. The 3 rushed to grab it, fearing that the porcelain bottle would fall to the ground and break, and the pill would roll down the cliff. But they didn't know that this was just Zuyun's distraction. He immediately threw out the fireball talisman in his right hand. "Be careful, this kid dares to resist." The blue-clothed young cultivator in front saw Zuyun's action, exclaimed and reminded him. But he saw that it was just a primary fireball talisman, and he couldn't help but hold the sword and rush forward. "Boy, is this all our 7th uncle taught you? A mere fireball talisman, watch me break it with 1 sword." As he spoke, the blue-clothed young cultivator stood up and stabbed the sword, and a sword energy was released to the center of the fireball talisman. The 2-finger-wide sword energy shot out and hit the center of the talisman. Boom! The fireball talisman exploded as soon as it touched it, and a huge ball of fire came out. This is not a fireball talisman at all." The blue-clothed young cultivator screamed and was instantly engulfed by the flames, and even the sword in his hand was blown in front of Zuyun. The blue-robed monk received the pills, and the white-robed monk immediately became murderous. "There's something wrong with this kid's talisman, let's kill him while we can." After saying that, 2 sword lights quickly stabbed towards Zuyun. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 13. The fireball talisman is just a primary talisman and will cast a fireball as big as a fist. Zuyun remembers it very clearly. At that time, Sun Suanhua saw him sleeping while reciting the formation diagram, but used the fireball talisman to burn all his hair. Where could there be such movement and such great power? Zuyun knew clearly in his heart that it must be because he used fire spiritual power to charge his spirit. Seeing the light of the sword coming, the two men had already stepped forward. Zuyun knew that if he used the fireball talisman again, he might be blown up. Just as he was about to imitate Sun Suanhua and lay down on the ground to avoid it, he suddenly caught a glimpse of the long sword on the ground from the corner of his eye, and he couldn't help but feel shocked. Even if I dodge the combined attack of the two of them, I'm afraid I won't be able to dodge their backhand. Apart from the fireball talisman, I only have the means to release my sword energy. Master clearly said that I was not allowed to practice swordsmanship, but he didn't say, let me use the sword to save my life, right? Thinking of this, Zuyun drew his long sword smoothly, and the golden spiritual power in his dantian naturally poured out. A familiar feeling arises spontaneously. This ordinary low-grade magical sword seemed to be the little golden sword that had been stabbed countless times at that time. Such movements have already been perfected. He bent his elbows slightly, already gathering all his strength, his eyes focused, and he straightened his body forward. 1 versus 2, let's shout. Let the sword energy out. When they saw Zuyun making the first move of the sword control technique, the two of them were surprised. Is this kid out of his mind? We don't even practice sword breaking techniques like the sword control technique, but you still use the first move against us? Apparently, he didn't even know that the fireball talisman just now was a fireball talisman. Thinking of this, the two of them smiled. But as the sword light appeared, their smiles froze, and then turned into fear. In their pupils, a waist-thick golden light was reflected, and they had only one thought in their minds: escape. Pity. At this time, they are trying their best, but the old strength has not gone away and the new strength has not yet been born. Even if you want to use your sword, it's too late. Boom. There was a loud noise, and when the golden light hit the two bodies, they exploded. Unlike the previous fireball talisman that engulfed one of them, this sword light directly exploded the two into bloody foam. Zuyun's face was spattered with blood and mud, and he didn't know whether it was from the monks in white or the monks in blue. The roar made his ears ring a bit, and the sight in front of him made him even more sluggish. A pothole appeared on the ground, and some stone swords nearby were also affected. The remaining swords were broken and shattered on the ground. At that time, he also used this trick, but it only damaged Sun Suanhua's clothes. But at this time, it is so powerful. Suddenly, he came back to his senses and felt bad. There is such a big movement, there are rules in the sect, and the disciples in the sect are not allowed to fight privately. But he killed 3 people one after another. Thinking of this, Zuyun's mind was spinning rapidly. At this moment, all he could do was find a corner and hide in the Dewu glazed mirror. By the time of the sect competition, I'm afraid the news will have gone away, and I won't come out again then. Zhu Chu turned around and walked down the mountain road, only to notice that the low-grade magic sword in his hand had cracks. He just threw it away without thinking much. As soon as he turned a corner of the mountain, several whistling sounds suddenly came from the air. Someone is coming with a sword. He didn't have time to take another look, and with the thought, he entered directly into the Dewu glazed mirror. Feeling the peace and quiet around him, he slumped down on the ground, leaning against the edge of the stone bed, breathing heavily. The frantic beating of the heart came from the chest, and it couldn't calm down for a long time. I actually killed someone, and killed 3 people. At this time, 3 sword lights fell to the ground, and the 3 old men stepped off the sword one after another. It's strange. The fight only ended within a few breaths of time, so why was there no one left? Both sides suffered losses. An old man with a square face looked puzzled and frowned. Sect Master, the spiritual power here just fluctuated a lot. I'm afraid the person who did it is not weak. Someone was burned to death here, like using the Firebird talisman with an intermediate talisman. Another old man hesitated to speak, but it turned out to be Elder Mu. When he heard the 3 words Firebird talisman, the sect leader's face tightened and he said angrily, "The Firebird talisman is Sun Suanhua's specialty. Looking at the debris on the ground, they should be the outer disciples of my spirit sword sect. Could it be possible, he thought, is this a way to express our hatred of banning him for hundreds of years?" Elder Mu snorted coldly and said, "Sect Master, you should go to the valley right now to see if Sun Suanhua is there. If he is not there, he must have done it. If he is not there, let him give us an explanation." The sect leader nodded. The third person who had not spoken yet seemed to have discovered something. He stretched out his hand and grabbed it. A broken sword flew out of thin air and fell into his hand. "Elder Wan, what have you discovered?" The sect leader and Elder Mu hurriedly stepped forward, with a look of humility on their faces. The monk who was called Elder Wan brushed the cracks on his sword and said meaningfully, "You too, your spirit sword sect has produced a peerless genius." Upon hearing this, both the sect leader and Elder Mu looked shocked and didn't know why. The sect leader said carefully, "Elder Wan, the most talented boy in our sect recently is Meng Beishi with the double spiritual roots of gold and wood. If you put him in our Lingjian sect, he is indeed first class. But when you go to Wanjian Mountain, you can't, it's just a piece of jade." Elder Mu also echoed, "Elder Wan, you have been stationed at Lingjian section, don't you know everything about who is in the sect?" Elder Wan's eyes revealed a glimmer of light, and he said, "Wan is not blaming you, but there is a talisman breath left in the air here, several breaths ranging from the 2nd to 4th level of the Qi refining stage, and a single spirit of the gold system. Gen's aura. Obviously, someone has sneaked into the Lingjian sect, but you don't know it. Elder Wan means." The sect leader continued to ask. "Your Lingjian sect is just an inferior sect, and Wan doesn't know the purpose of that person sneaking in here. However, that Qi refining boy is also smart. In order to hide his whereabouts, he uses talismans to kill people. Then he had no choice but to, after using the skill, as everyone knows, Wan comes from Wanjian Mountain, so as long as he has used the sword, Wan will naturally be able to detect it." After saying that, Elder Wan suddenly snorted coldly, "You, the Lingjian sect, must find this boy. The gold-type single spirit root, a peerless sword training genius. If he is accepted by me, Wanjian Mountain, you will be the disciple of me, a great achievement." At this point, the sect leader and Elder Mu were about to bow down and accept their orders, but saw Elder Wan suddenly swing his sword forward. This useless low-grade magic weapon actually flew through the air without being affected at all. The two of them were shocked when they heard a scream. "Oh, why are you beating me, son? Sun is just passing by. Sun Suanhua?" The sect leader and Elder Mu looked at each other, then immediately stood up and rushed away. "Sure enough, I saw Sun Suanhua sitting on the ground, rubbing his stomach. Sect Master, Elder Mu, why are you beating me up so well? In the end, Sun has nothing to do with you." The elixirs were handed over in full, as was the magic sword. If Zuyun were here, Sun Suanhua's image in his heart would definitely be ruined. "Sun Suanhua, what are you doing at Misjian Cliff?" The sect leader asked sternly. If Elder Wan hadn't ruled out that Sun Suanhua was not responsible for this, he would have definitely taught Sun Suanhua a lesson first. "Sect Master, you have misunderstood." Sun Suanhua stood up quickly and saw the unsmiling Elder Wan from the corner of his eye, thinking something bad in his heart. But after all, he has also been struggling in the world of immortality for more than 100 years, and said quickly, "Sun just handed over the task in the alchemy room." He heard the movement of the talisman here, which seemed to be the Firebird talisman drawn by Sunday. "I couldn't help but come over to take a look, thinking that my Lingjian sect also has a talent for drawing talismans, and I want to communicate with him. This is Sun Suanhua's truth." He still hid half a sentence in his stomach, but he knew that the movement just now was no different from the sword he received from Zuyun in the valley. I have already said that this young man is ungrateful, and he is forbidden to practice swordsmanship, and his sword is also taken away. Who knew that this kid would do this in Magian Cliff? As soon as he arrived here, before he could take a breath, he was hit by Elder Wan. He looked down at the broken sword. It is a standard low-grade magical sword that I refined for the Spirit Sword sect. And the cracks on it were all too familiar to him. Exactly the same as the golden sword. But what about that damn boy Zuyun? Humph, I'm sorry you don't dare to make a mistake. The sect leader said coldly, and smiled at Elder Wan again. Elder Wan, when the sects compete, the villain and Elder Mu should pay more attention to it. Elder Wan glared at him, then stood up with his sword and soared into the sky. The sect leader breathed a sigh of relief. He could not offend Elder Wan and did not dare to offend him, so he took his anger out on Sun Suanhua. Sun Suanhua, I heard that you accepted a boy with 5 spiritual roots as your disciple. Sun Suanhua hurriedly said, Sect Master, don't blame me. It's just that Sun has been a little weak recently, so he brought him over to help fight the underlings. Moreover, Sun also asked him to register under the Lingjian section if it really counts. He can't be counted as Sun's disciple. The sect leader raised his eyebrows and raised his tone, Huh? Are you serious about this? It's true. That boy's name is Zuyun, and he came with Bai Shi and Huang Hua. Elder Mu responded at this time and helped Sun Suanhua out of the siege. The sect leader said no more, leaving a message to take care of himself, and left with Elder Mu Yujian, leaving Sun Suanhua sitting on the ground sweating profusely, scolding everyone in the Lingjian sect in his heart, including Zuyun. But while cursing and cursing, he laughed again. This kid is very good at hiding. Could it be that he learned the movement technique today? He is a damn genius. It seems that I am hopefully out of the sea of misery. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 14. Sun Suanhua knew that these 3 people must have been killed by Zuyun. 2 of them died under the sword. But he was puzzled by the way the other one died. The sect leader and others couldn't see it, thinking it was the Firebird talisman. But he was proficient in talismans, and was best at the Firebird talisman, so how could he not recognize that this was the effect caused by the Fireball talisman? But why can this Fireball talisman have such great power? Sun Suanhua was puzzled. But then he thought, Zuyun could make such a big noise even with a sword energy, so it was not surprising that a primary talisman like the Fireball talisman could produce such an effect. After figuring it out, Sun Suanhua no longer struggled, and walked away humming a song with his hands behind his back. He was not afraid that Zuyun would run away. It was easy to enter the Spirit Sword sect, but it was difficult to leave. Disciples in the sect must register if they want to leave. And this matter was under the jurisdiction of Qin Lycan. As long as I find a reason to let him know, the kid will definitely not be able to escape. I have to say that Sun Suanhua's guess was indeed quite accurate. Zuyun didn't even think about leaving. It was only a cup of tea time before the sect master and others arrived. But in the day a glass mirror, a stick of incense had passed, and Zuyun's mood had calmed down. He kept thinking about what had just happened. Those 3 people just saw Go and Go handing him the pill, and they wanted to kill him before they even saw him accept it. Even the sect was so dangerous, let alone going out for training in the future. And this time, the reason why the weak defeated the strong and the few defeated the many was because of the surprise. Whether it was cheating, using the fulling pill to attract the attention of the 3 people, or using the Fireball talisman and the Yujian Ju successively, it all showed this point. It seems that if you want to protect yourself in the future, you must have an unknown trump card. The power of the Fireball talisman was beyond my expectation because I filled it all with fire spirit power. What if it is the elementary talisman of other series, will it have such an effect? Also, what if it is the intermediate talisman Firebird talisman? Thinking of this, Zhu Yun's heart can't help but be hot. But using talismans alone is obviously not enough. The sword controlling technique can also become his trump card. What a pity. Not only does he not have a magic sword, but he also has a move that destroys the magic sword. Even if he has money, he can't afford it. Sighing, Zhu Yun deeply felt the importance of resources at this time. Without a sword in his hand, he can't practice the sword controlling technique. The talisman paper is gone. Even if he has learned several other elementary talismans, he can't continue to draw talismans. If he goes out at this time, who knows if the 3 people who just flew in are still there. Zhu Yun scratched his head and simply crossed his legs to start refining qi. He just consumed a lot of gold spiritual power. Although the rest of the spiritual power will be replenished, the total amount is still reduced. It's better to replenish it first. What if I stay for several days and go out, and the 3 people are still outside? You have to know that to fly with a sword, you must be at least at the 6th level of qi refining. 3 hours later, Zhu Yun's dantian was full, and he had nothing to do again. Feeling irritated, he stomped back and forth in the narrow cave. Suddenly, he saw another book under the introduction to talismans. Then he remembered that he came to Magian Cliff to practice body skills. Since the master said that body skills are also one of his methods, why not learn it? Anyway, he was free. Zhu Yun immediately became full of motivation, took the body skills book, sat cross-legged on the bed, and opened the first page. What is body technique? Body technique is the method of the body. There are many kinds of body techniques, including footwork that matches moves, such as sword steps, knife steps, and gun steps. There are those who are as slippery as loaches, walking ghostly in the battle, and the enemy's moves are missed, and you can punch them hard. The victory will be decided by the decline of one's strengths and the decline of the other. There are also light body techniques, which are as light as a swallow, climbing clouds and ladders, coming without a shadow, leaving without a trace. Walking on snow for thousands of miles without leaving a trace, and piercing clouds with waves for thousands of feet. This martial art is called the secret of longevity, which is the pinnacle of body techniques and the essence of martial arts. Seeing this, Zhu Yun was speechless. The body technique is actually called the secret of longevity, which is a bit too arrogant. A mortal warrior, even a master-level figure, might be burned to ashes by his fireball talisman. He shook his head. Although he felt that the introduction of the body technique was a bit unreliable, he still read it. What is immortality? We warriors can live forever if we don't fight with others. If someone fights me, it's best to run away. At this moment, Zhu Yun's face couldn't help but look strange. After thinking carefully, he was right. If you don't fight with others, can't you live forever? Soon, he became interested. He lacked means, and the world of immortal cultivation was far more cunning and sinister than the mortal world. If he could learn this body technique, it would be a good idea. He didn't know whether this eternal life secret could make him immortal, but maybe it could really help him cultivate the great way and pursue immortality. After becoming interested, Zhu Yun began to read it page by page. The advantage of cultivators learning the mortal skills is that they can understand them at a glance and remember them all. But the difference is that the skills are to understand every move and form in your mind and practice them into the body's instinctive reaction. Only then can they be used naturally in critical moments. Cultivators never practice physical training, and are used to performing everything with spiritual power, which also makes the cultivators physically weak. Zhu Yun has already figured out in what circumstances to use this longevity secret. After putting the book aside, Zhu Yun began to focus on cultivation. This training lasts for another 7 days. Zhu Yun has been running and playing in the mountains since he was a child, which actually laid a considerable foundation for him. In just 7 days, he had achieved some success and could already walk silently. Although monks can do it too. But that requires spiritual power. Zuyun is like this. As long as he wants to, no matter what the environment, he can't make a sound. In other words, if he loses all his spiritual power in the future, he can still remain silent. It's been more than a day outside, right? There shouldn't be anyone left. Zhu Yongxiang thought so, but he didn't dare to be too careful. Instead, he held a fireball talisman in both hands at the same time, and then left the Diwu glazed mirror with held breath. The sky is slightly bright. Early morning hours. The surroundings were still lifeless, but in the distance there were young children calling and begging for food. Zuyun couldn't help but think of Sun Suanhua's words again, feeling inexplicable in his heart. Monks are like all the beasts in the world of immortality, preying on the weak and the strong. If you are weak, you will be a bug when you get up early. If you are strong, you will be a bird when you get up early. Zuyun breathed a sigh of relief, but did not put away the fireball talisman. After walking a few steps back along the mountain road, the place where the fight took place had been cleaned, but there was still a faint smell of blood. Just as he was about to walk quickly, Zuyun suddenly thought that the 3 people who passed by that day must have looked for the murderer's footprints here. If I just walked over like this and left footprints. Thinking of this, Zuyun immediately used the longevity technique, and his body was as light as a swallow, without even touching the ground. Although it is not as fast as those monks, it is better than leaving no footprints at all. Zuyun ran all the way and stopped after seeing the stone tablet with the words Magianya written on it. After adjusting his breathing, he walked back to the sect as if nothing had happened. Today was already the day of the sect competition, and no one came here for the trial. Until they reached the mountain gate and saw Qin Liken, Zuyun didn't meet any of his fellow sect members. 5th junior brother, where are you going? Qin Liken got Sun Suanhua's order and worked hard all day and night. When you feel sleepy, take a refreshing pill and don't dare to lose your mind at all. Seeing Zuyun, he stood up in shock and asked. Ah, senior brother Liken, I am going back to the valley. Zuyun said quickly. He just wanted to say hello to Qin Liken. After all, big dogs and 2 dogs are not common in the sect at this time, and Qin Liken is considered to have a good relationship with him. Just go back, just go back. Qin Liken patted his chest a few times, breathed a sigh of relief and said, your master told me to tell you to go back to the valley as soon as I saw you. Why did you come back today? Today is the sect competition. If I don't come back today, will I come back tomorrow? Zuyun said with a smile. Wait a minute, have you been at Confused Sword Cliff? Qin Liken's expression suddenly tightened and he asked in a low voice. Yeah, what's wrong? Seeing his expression, Zuyun vaguely guessed something, but he had no idea what happened after the killing, so he wanted to find out. You don't know, 3 of my fellow sects died in the Misty Sword Cliff. Qin Liken looked around, but it was already getting light and no one was coming to the mountain gate. What? 3 died? Zuyun also exclaimed. Having once again witnessed the cruelty of the world of immortality, Zuyun naturally had reservations and there was no need to tell Qin Liken about this. Yes, it's great that you're okay, Qin Liken said with lingering fear. At first, I thought it was you 3 kids from Barren Rock Mountain who had been robbed of the elixir. Fortunately it wasn't you. Zuyun smiled and said, Senior brother Liken, you are making too much fuss. How can I have a pill with a 5 spirit root? In the entire Lingjian sect, I am the poorest. Qin Liken shook his head and said, yes, you are poor. But Meng Beishi and Zhou Huanghua are not poor. If they happen to go to a place that is inaccessible, there is no guarantee that some of their classmates will not be able to bear evil intentions. Upon hearing this, Zuyun's heart suddenly skipped a beat. He has personally experienced things like killing fellow disciples, and knows that cruel people will directly kill and silence them. So, Zuyun took out all the remaining fireball talismans without hesitation and stuffed them into Qin Liken's hands. Senior brother Li Chang, please give each of them 5 fireball talismans for self-defense when you see them. The other one can be used as payment for your hard work from junior brother. Qin Liken said quickly, 5th junior brother, you are too polite. But even if this elementary fireball talisman is really in danger, what use will it be? Zuyun did not explain, but solemnly said, Senior brother, this is my brother's wish. But please don't tell others about this. Maybe it will have miraculous effects when you are in danger. Seeing Zuyun's solemn expression, Qin Liken only thought that this was the little baby's wish, so he couldn't bear to refuse and took them all into his arms. Thank you, Senior brother Liken. Junior brother, take your leave. Zuyun didn't hesitate and walked quickly towards the valley. Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 15. After passing through the fog formation, Zuyun quickened his pace. There are still some talisman papers in his house, and he wants to take this opportunity to draw more. But I never thought that I would almost bump into Sun Suanhua. Hey, baby, why are you leaving in such a hurry? Sun Suanhua said expressionlessly. Ah, I've met Master. I think the sect competition will start at noon, and I plan to draw some fireball talismans and put them on my body. Little kid, I happen to be a teacher and I want to test how well you are doing at school, so let's come together. Zuyun was slightly startled, secretly feeling that something was wrong. Originally, Sun Suanhua asked him to go to Magian Cliff to practice body skills during the day and learn to draw talismans in the valley at night. And he was gone for 2 days and 1 night, but he didn't ask why. When something goes wrong, there must be a monster. Zuyun was deep in thought and guessed that Sun Suanhua must have been to Mistward Cliff. By the way, didn't Qin Liken also say that Master left a message for him? Then he must have seen the scene, and he must have seen himself using the fireball talisman. No, this is now one of my trump cards, and I can't let Master know about it for the time being. Zuyun thought of this and made a decision in his heart. Sun Suanhua walked very fast, and Zuyun followed closely behind him. Sudden. Sun Suanhua stopped, and Zuyun almost bumped into him without noticing. Fortunately, he had practiced the immortality technique. Before anyone could react, his body moved first and he dodged past him nimbly. Little baby, your body skills. When Sun Suanhua saw that Zuyun could keep up with his speed, he felt something was wrong. But this time, he was shocked. Returning to Master, I have been practicing hard in the confused sword cliff, so I forgot about the time, and now I have achieved a small success. Zuyun took advantage of Sun Suanhua's surprise and found a reason for himself to stay out all night. Oh! Sun Suanhua looked incomprehensible and felt strange in his heart. Could it be that it was not Zuyun who did it last night? He had also practiced this body technique before, but it was not considered a profound technique for a cultivator, so he had practiced it for half a month before he had achieved it. But Zuyun only had 2 days? Strange. Although Sun Suanhua was confused in his heart, he did not show it on his face. Instead, he patted Zuyun on the shoulder with a look of surprise and said, "Good boy, you really didn't embarrass me. Let's go and see if your ability to draw talismans is as good as yours. The method is the same, let me be amazed." Master, the disciple made a mistake in drawing the talisman. If the drawing is not good, don't blame the disciple. Zuyun said quickly. How could it be possible? You are a little kid, even though you are one size younger than Meng Beishi, you are still very smart. I will take good care of you. While talking, Sun Suanhua took Zhu Yun to the side room, where Sun Suanhua usually drew talismans. Come on, let me draw a fireball talisman for you to take a look at. Sun Suanhua personally laid out the talisman paper and prepared the cinnabar talisman pen. Zhu Yun was not polite. He picked up the talisman pen and dipped it in some cinnabar, then he concentrated for a moment before writing. The talisman pen moved smoothly under Zhu Yun's control, and in just a few breaths, a fireball talisman took shape. Come on, fill me up with spiritual power and let me see it. Sun Suanhua was slightly surprised. The talisman drawn by Zhu Yun is no worse than him. How long has he been studying? One night? But he was surprised. He could feel that there was nothing unusual about this fireball talisman. So, is it a matter of spiritual power? Yes, master. Zhu Yun lowered his head, hearing a hint of anxiety in Sun Suanhua's tone, and became more cautious. After placing his hand on the talisman, he concentrated on looking inside his dantian and controlled the 5 series of spiritual powers to flow out together. Unlike controlling one type of fire spiritual power before, controlling 5 spiritual powers at the same time made him somewhat powerless. Zhu Yun was shocked. As soon as the 5 spiritual powers left his dantian, he lost control. In an instant, they were mixed together, constantly entangled and spinning, running rampant in his meridians. But fortunately, Zhu Yun always remembers the word hung and controls the same amount of 5 spiritual powers, so there is no danger of self-destruction. Sun Suanhua, on the other hand, frowned in confusion and felt strange in his heart. This kid is obviously in the chi refining period, but why is it so difficult to charge the fireball talisman? The sweat is pouring from his forehead. But when he thought that Zhu Yun had 5 spiritual roots, he was immediately relieved. It seemed that the powerful fireball talisman yesterday had nothing to do with Zhu Yun. But what happened to the cracked magic sword? With such doubts, Sun Suanhua watched Zhu Yun complete a fireball talisman. This talisman is no different from the one he drew himself. It's also a worthless thing. Sun Suanhua looked at Zhu Yun and saw that he had opened his eyes and was breathing slightly. He couldn't help but said sarcastically, let's just say it, the 5 spiritual roots are not easy to cultivate. It takes so much effort to fill a talisman. Zhu Yun curled his lips and said, but master, didn't you ask me to draw the talisman? If I learn how to draw the talisman, what's the use of the talisman if it can't be filled with spirit? What a good boy, you still dare to talk back. You know what the heck? My teacher asked you to draw these talismans just to lay the foundation. When you learn the intermediate and advanced talismans, even if you draw a semi-finished product, there will be countless people crying and begging you. Sun Suanhua was not lying. If you only draw semi-finished talismans, as long as you have the corresponding talisman line diagram, even advanced people can draw them. If you can't recharge the spirit yourself, there will naturally be someone who can recharge the talisman. Hearing this, Zhu Yun suddenly understood. But then I thought about it, could it be that Master was also responsible for drawing talismans for the Lingjian sect in addition to refining elixirs and weapons? Boy, what's your expression? Sun Suanhua suddenly sneered, interrupting Zhu Yun's thoughts. Zhu Yun quickly said, Master, I am thinking that since it is so difficult to charge a fireball talisman, should I participate in the sect competition? This question stopped Sun Suanhua. Originally, his idea was that Zhu Yun would use his body skills to avoid attacks during the fight, and then wait for the opportunity to counter-attack with the talisman. It can be said that they complement each other. But now that I see him, even if he starts painting from now until noon, he will be pretty good if he can draw 3 or 5 finished pieces. Is it possible that I also imbued the fireball talisman he drew with spirit? Impossible. I'm still busy. Forget it. With your little skills, You got people killed in the past. Sun Suanhua shook his head and said, Master, this is wrong. Zuyun seemed to have remembered something and said, Don't I have Shenfa? Why don't you give it a try? In the sword confusion cliff, those swords and stones are dead objects. It's a real battle with others, maybe I can make progress faster. Do you really think so? Hearing this, Sun Suanhua looked strange. For him, Zuyun's learning of Kung Fu was secondary. The most important thing is to learn his methods of refining weapons, alchemy, drawing talismans, etc. to make offerings to the spirit sword section. Otherwise, you should agree to him. In this way, if he learns my other skills, he might become more attentive. Yes, Master. I will definitely learn your 7 skills. Zuyun promised. In that case, I promise you, but you only have a fireball talisman. What if you encounter someone at the 9th level of chi refining and you can't restrain yourself? Sun Suanhua's worries were justified. Although sects compete more with each other than Do, at his level, if someone gets drawn to the 9th level of chi refining, he will lose his skin even if he doesn't die. When the time comes, I won't have any place to cry. How about? Zuyun rolled his eyes and asked tentatively, Master, can you give me another sword so that I can use it for self-defense? No, Sun Suanhua immediately shouted loudly. Master, I don't have to. I'm just afraid, just in case. Zuyun continued. I won't do it if I say no. If you still want to participate in the duel, don't even think about using the sword. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude. Sun Suanhua's mood immediately became excited, and Zuyun had no choice but to give up and said, Master, can I draw the fireball talisman and you can help me fill it with spirit? The more rounds of competitions I participate in, the faster my body skills will improve. Are you doing hard work for me as a master? You have to draw your own paintings. As a master, you have to make elixirs, so you can figure it out on your own. After saying that, Sun Suanhua waved his sleeves and left. Zuyun was thoughtful, and the doubts in his heart escalated. What can I do if I don't have a sword? I can ask Big Dog Urga for one, but if I use a sword, what trouble will it cause? After much deliberation, Zuyun decided not to use the sword until he figured it out. It seems that I still have to draw the fireball charm. Back in the house, Zuyun drew dozens of fireball talismans in one go, saving 5. He brought the rest of the fireball talismans and blank talismans to the Dewu glazed mirror and came out immediately. The next step is to charge these 5 semi-finished products with spirit. It was true that he told Sun Suanhua to hone his body skills, but more importantly, he wanted to gain some fighting experience. Putting his hand on a fireball talisman, Zuyun began to control the 5 spiritual powers in his body, and slowly charged the fireball talisman with spirit. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 16. By the time the 5 fireball talismans were fully charged, the spiritual power in Zuyun's body was almost exhausted. And his whole body was extremely tired. Hey, what am I doing this for? Controlling 5 elements at the same time is not only tiring, but also much less powerful. Sighing, I sighed, but with the 5 talismans fully charged, Zuyun was not without gains. When charging the first card, the 5 spiritual powers left the dantian and became uncontrollable. But by the time the last one was charged, he could already control it to an inch away from his dantian. Cultivation is difficult, but cultivating the 5 spiritual roots is even more difficult. Zuyun shook his head, sat cross-legged on the ground, and began to refine his qi. Before noon, he could recover as much as he could. About half an hour later, Footsteps were heard outside the door. Sun Suanhua pushed the door open with fireworks. As soon as Zhu Yung opened his eyes, he saw Sun Suanhua throwing a pill casually. "Little baby, this is the Iki pill, it will help you restore your spiritual power." Zhu Yun's expression changed slightly, and he just said thank you to master, but when he saw Sun Suanhua left a word, he turned and left. "Boy, if you encounter someone at the 9th level of Qi refining, surrender immediately." Zhu Yun had mixed feelings in his heart. He felt that Sun Suanhua's attitude towards him. Sometimes it's very caring, sometimes it's confusing. According to Dago, he has a share in refining the elixirs, and even if the refining is useless, he has to hand it over. Then this Iki pill was probably something he worked hard to squeeze out, right? At least he is still worried about something happening to me, so just take this pill. Zhu Yun stuffed the elixir into his mouth. The Heki pill melts in the mouth and immediately turns into a warm current flowing into the lower abdomen and spreading towards the internal organs. Zhu Yun quickly used the Qi refining technique in the 5 elements of Chaos Sutra to absorb the medicinal power. This warm current suddenly gained traction and stopped spreading. Instead, it slowly gathered towards the Danshan and was slowly absorbed. After a while, the spiritual power in Zhu Yun's Danshan became full. The 5-color large turntable rotates slowly. He could clearly see that no matter which color the spiritual power transformed by the medicine fell into, it would be immediately assimilated into the same color. At this point, it was impossible to tell the difference. He could even faintly notice that the 5-color wheel had become slightly larger. The elixir is indeed magical. Zhu Yun opened his eyes, and there was a flash of light, thinking that Ergo said that he gave him Heki pill, and thought that they had taken less pills, right? No wonder those 3 fellow disciples are greedy. Dang dang dang. At this moment, suddenly there was a melodious sound of bells outside the house, and after reaching the valley, it kept echoing. Zhu Yun looked out the window. The sun was shining directly at the bottom of the valley. It was already noon. The sect competition has begun. He stood up and straightened his clothes, with a look of determination on his face. In order to practice, he must rank as high as possible to obtain sect resource rewards. In order to have more trump cards, he still needs to learn more skills from Sun Suanhua in the valley. Sun Suanhua went somewhere unknown, while Zhu Yun left the valley alone. When he reached the mountain gate, he didn't see Qin Liken. On the contrary, at this time, the mountain gate was also sealed by a special transparent shield, and the trail down the mountain was not visible at all. This should be the formation restriction, right? Zhu Yun reached out and touched it, and his hand was cold, like a mist of water. But it was extremely tough, and his hand couldn't get through it at all. It's really magical. The mist formation is also a formation, but this water formation is completely different. Zhu Yun muttered a few words, then turned and walked towards the inside of the sect. The sect competition is in the direction of the Great Harmony Hall. After arriving at Yamatoten Hall, you can walk a few hundred steps to the Sword Dance Hall. The arena is located over there. The rest of his classmates may have gone early, but Zhu Yun was alone, walking on the stone road empty-handed. Suddenly, a voice sounded from behind. "Little kid, you are also going to participate in the competition, right?" Hearing this voice, Zhu Yun quickly looked back. I didn't know when, but there was an old man following behind me. Perhaps it was because the old man was floating on the sword because he stepped on it, but Zhu Yun didn't notice it. He was shocked. If this old man attacked him secretly, he might die without knowing it. "Why, little baby, you seem to be afraid of me?" the old man asked with a kind look on his face and a smile. "Senior, I'm not afraid, but I was shocked," Zhu Yun said cautiously. "What are you afraid of?" the old man laughed. "Today's Spirit Sword Sect Grand Competition, I was casually patrolling around, but I saw you alone, so I came over to ask." You haven't answered my words yet, are you also participating? After Zuyun heard these words, he nodded and said, yes, senior, I am participating in the sect competition. The old man shook his head and said, but why don't you bring a sword to participate? Lingjian sect practices various sword techniques. Is it possible that you want to use your hand as a sword? Zuyun originally wanted to say that his master would not let him practice swordsmanship. But when I suddenly thought about it, I felt something was wrong. I am just a minor chi practitioner, how could I attract the attention of such a senior? When the words came to his lips, he quickly swallowed them and said, Senior, I have never practiced swordsmanship, and my master doesn't know how to swordsmanship, so I simply don't practice swordsmanship anymore. Oh, the old man raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, in the entire Lingjian sect, only Sun Suanhua does not practice swordsmanship. Could it be that you are Sun Suanhua's disciple? Senior, please understand. I am the one, Zuyun did not deny it. After all, he was already registered in the Spirit Sword sect and worshipped under Sun Suanhua. This Sun Suanhua has no ability himself, and he insisted that his apprentice not practice sword. The old man shook his head and said, my last name is Wan. You can call me Senior Wan. As a disciple of the Spirit Sword sect, wouldn't it be a joke if I don't have a sword? It's fate that we meet today. I will give you a long sword. Maybe in the future, you can practice sword. Zuyun was slightly stunned. I have seen people robbing things, but I have never seen people giving things away. There must be something wrong when things are abnormal. However, I just happen to be short of money, and Senior Wan didn't say that I should use the sword now. It's better to accept it first. He quickly took it with both hands and said in surprise, thank you, Senior Wan. Ha ha ha, Elder Wan laughed loudly, stroked his goatee, and then asked, boy, Sun Suanhua hasn't accepted a disciple for 100 years. I think you are very smart. Tell me, what is your spiritual root? Speaking of this, Zuyun had no pressure at all. He immediately held the sword in front of him and said respectfully, reply to Senior Wan, the boy has 5 spiritual roots. What? Elder Wan blew his beard and glared, at least he didn't fall off the sword. He was the elder stationed here by Wanjian Mountain, and he only collected the seedlings and sent them to Wanjian Mountain. Usually the sect master handed over the disciples who had practiced well to him, so how could he pay attention to the other disciples? I thought that Sun Suanhua also came on the day of what happened at Magian Cliff, but it seemed to have nothing to do with Sun Suanhua. So I thought about testing whether it was related to Sun Suanhua's apprentice. But this kid actually has 5 spiritual roots? Is the Spirit Sword sect so hungry that they have taken in all the 5 spiritual roots? This is a big loss. No wonder his mother Sun Suanhua doesn't let you practice sword. It's me, I won't let you practice either. Elder Wan cursed in his heart, this sword was given away for nothing. Although it is just a low-grade magic weapon. But it was given to the 5 spiritual roots, it was all in vain. But at this time, he didn't have the face to take it back, so he could only laugh dryly, well, not bad, not bad, the 5 spiritual roots are pretty good. So, you walk slowly, I still have to continue my inspection. After that, he flew into the sky with his sword. Zuyun blinked and hung the sword on his waist. When the master comes to ask, I will say that it was given by Elder Wan. See if you dare to break it for me. Thinking of this, Zuyun was very happy and hung the sword on his waist. However, he still remembered that he could not use the sword control technique. At this time, the bell rang again, and it was the 2nd time. If it rang for the 3rd time, it meant that the sect competition officially began, and it would be too late for him to participate. Zuyun quickened his pace, and after a short trot, he arrived at the sword dance field. Here, there were crowds of people, and the 8 arenas were surrounded by disciples in the chi refining period. Boy, Are you also here to participate in the sect competition? Present your identity card, and this elder will register you. Zuyun looked in the direction of the sound, and saw an old man with a dignified look sitting at the entrance of the sword dance field, looking at him with a straight face. Yes, elder. He quickly handed over the card with both hands. Surname Zhu, name Yun, 5 spiritual roots. The elder touched the identity card, and his spiritual power swept over it. He was immediately surprised and looked at Zuyun. Little kid, are you here to die? I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 17. Zuyun said quickly, Elder, I just want to come and see you. At this time, he could not say that he wanted to participate in the competition and get rewards. Oh, the elder raised his brows and said, I guess you are self-aware. Let's go to the A-shaped arena. After writing down Zuyun's name on a piece of paper, he sent Zuyun in. Anyone who knew that Zuyun had the 5 spiritual roots would inevitably be scornful. Zuyun thought that Sun Suanhua did not allow him to use the sword. Could it be that he was afraid that he would become famous and be snatched away as his apprentice by other elders? It's possible. He calculated that if he could really show his talent, he would definitely be treated the same as Big Dog and Urgu. But will the secrets about the 5 elements of Chaos Sutra and the Dewu glazed mirror also be discovered? It would be better to stay in the valley where no one cares and learn these skills from Master. Moreover, he can also take advantage of the opportunity to practice his body skills and enter the Dewu glazed mirror at Magian Cliff to practice his own realm. That's it. After Zuyun figured it out, he walked towards the A-shaped arena with ease. There are 8 arenas, divided into upper and lower halves. The upper half of the area is for monks competing at the 6th level of Qi refining and above, divided into heaven, earth, benevolence, and 4 places. The lower half are the disciples who have started in the past 3 years, divided into A, B, C and D. Zuyun found the A-shaped size and saw the logo early. At this time, on the stage, 2 fellow students were already handing over their registration numbers to each other. He is a year or 2 older than Zuyun, and he has a decent attitude. Zuyun was naturally very interested when he saw the scene for the first time. Presumably, these fellow disciples have all learned the sword control technique, so I can observe more and see if I can draw inferences from one example. Following an order from a middle-aged monk, the young man in grey robe on the left side of the arena took the lead in attacking. He stabbed away with a small golden sword and let out a shout of sword energy. A 3-finger-wide sword energy came out from the sword. The tip shoots out? What a strong sword energy! The audience couldn't help but exclaimed. Zuyun was slightly startled. The sword energy he used was as strong as a waist shot, and it was countless times stronger than the 3-finger-wide sword energy. It seems that there is no comparison. I really don't know how powerful this metal spiritual power is. The sword energy was shot here, and the opponent did not sit still and wait for death. Although his brows were furrowed, he was not in a hurry. I saw him standing in front of the sword, muttering words in his mouth, and a yellow light spread out from the center of the sword, covering his entire body. Wow, this senior brother actually learned the art of sword protection. What is sword protection? You don't understand this? Who means protection? This is a defensive sword move. Zuyun listened to the discussions coming from all around, his eyes never leaving the fellow disciple who was using the sword protection technique. Others didn't know it clearly, but he could clearly feel that most of the yellow light was heavy earth spiritual power. If I use this trick, can it make the shield stronger? As soon as he thought of this, the sword energy hit the shield. There was just a sharp sound, and the sword energy was spinning on the shield like a substance. Childish, the sword is in the name of Prophet, you actually learn this sword protecting technique. The young man wielding the sword energy had a sneer on his face, as if he was sure of victory. Zuyun felt that what his fellow disciple said was reasonable. When he released his sword energy, he used all the metal spiritual power. The definition of metal spiritual power in the 5 elements of Chaos Sutra is the word prophet. If my earth shield is thick enough, you may not be able to break me. The opponent struggled to hold on, but did not admit defeat. Hey, then don't blame me for being rude. After the words fell, another move of sword energy was released. The sword energy, which was also 3 fingers wide, shot out under the control of the young man. Oh my God, his last sword energy has not dissipated, and he can release the next one. Everyone exclaimed, obviously this is an incredible thing. Zuyun didn't know about this situation. He just felt that the battle between these two people was not good at all. They all stood in place without moving a single step. How can there be such a fight? He frowned. Is this the only way for immortal cultivators? You can avoid it by just using your body skills. The sword energy released just now was fast, but it also had a weakness. That is, once the sword energy leaves the sword, it cannot turn. As long as he gives up his position casually, he can avoid the sword energy. Zuyun didn't know that the people competing on this stage were all teenagers who had not been practicing for a long time. He only knows how to practice hard to make the moves he is good at stronger, and he has no fighting experience at all. If Zuyun went to watch the competition in the first half, he would not have such thoughts. As time passes, the two people on the stage were attacking and defending, and the people in the audience gradually lost interest. Everyone can see at this moment that the competition is about the level of spiritual power. Whoever runs out of spiritual power first loses. In the end, after a stick of incense, the young man who took the initiative to attack was the first to exhaust his spiritual power, and was swept off the ring by the sword of his fellow disciple who was defending. It makes you crazy. Don't you know that people in the world of cultivating immortals should not be judged by their appearance? The young man was full of energy, and the grievances of the beating were all vented at this moment. The steward who was the referee stepped forward, took out a pill and handed it over. Take it and wait for the next challenger. In the audience, there were people who couldn't hold it any longer and jumped onto the ring before he could swallow the pill. You are just a turtle with a shrunken head. Wait and see how I break your turtle shell. This young man looks a bit like the young man before. Even if he is not a brother, he is a cousin, and he obviously came to avenge him. The deacon glanced at him coldly and said, "You can only challenge him after his spiritual power has recovered. Before that, you are not allowed to speak." "Yes, Lord Deacon." The young man stepped aside respectfully. After a moment, his opponent had already absorbed the spiritual power in the elixir and stood up straight away. "Deacon Bing, this disciple is already well." The deacon gave up his position without saying anything more. "You can start." "I am Huang Dingren, tell me your name." "Guanzheng, I came here to vent my anger on my brother." Point to point. After the words fell, the young man named Zheng Guan raised his sword and took a big step forward. He smiled evilly and said, "Let me show you how powerful my sword steps are." As soon as these words came out, someone below exclaimed again. Sword step is the footwork that matches the sword move. If properly integrated, the lethality can be increased by several %. However, learning the sword step is not that easy. Moreover, not all sword techniques can complement sword steps. Huang Dingren didn't panic. He once again crossed his sword in front of him and used his sword protecting skills. As soon as the earth yellow shield was raised, Zheng Guan's sword had already struck it. Bang! There was a muffled sound, the shield vibrated a few times, and then returned to its original state. "I thought you were so powerful, come on, keep cutting." A sinister smile appeared on Huang Dingren's face. He still wanted to withstand Zheng Guan's attack and then fight back. But Zheng Guan looked disdainful and said, "Do you think your sword is just made of earth materials? My sword, has a hilt made of century-old locust wood. After saying that, he flipped his wrist, and green light flowed on the hilt of the sword, quickly jumping to the sword body. He slashed with his sword again. There was obviously no movement as before, but a crack was cut into the shield. I forgot to mention that I have the 4 spiritual roots of wood, water, metal, and fire, but I don't have earth. It's a real joke that you use earth to block me. As Zheng Guan spoke, he kept slashing with his sword. Huang Dingren had long lost his previous calmness and could only hold on with all his strength. Zhu Yun knew that Huang Dingren was destined to lose. But what he thought more about was that the 5 elements were in conflict with each other, and these people knew how to take advantage of it. But only he can practice the cultivation method of 5 elements of Chaos Sutra. Wouldn't it be possible that if he succeeds in his cultivation in the future, and when facing an enemy, he can easily transform and restrain the opponent's spiritual power, that would be a disadvantage? Thinking of this, Zhu Yun became a little excited. It seems that he still has to seize the opportunity to practice this technique, so that it will be the capital for him to settle down and live in the future. One day, he will make all those who despise his 5 spiritual roots look at him with admiration. Finally, Zheng Guan cut through Huang Dingren's protective shield and swept him down with his sword, avenging his brother's exhaustion and humiliation. No one was on the stage anymore. Because Zheng Guanhui's sword step is unmatched by these young people who have only been in the industry for 3 years. If no one comes forward, the winner of the A-shaped arena will be Guanzheng. The deacon first threw a pill to Guanzheng, and then said loudly to everyone in the audience, "Is this gone?" Zhu Yun Bingshui knew the rules before, but when he heard that they were gone, his heart tightened. "I didn't come here to watch a show." There was no hesitation immediately, and with a movement of his body, he was already standing on the ring. "Little brat, you come up to challenge me." Seeing that Zhu Yun was only about 10 years old and 2 heads shorter than himself, Zheng Guan looked stunned and stopped stuffing the elixir into his mouth. "Wish Yun." Zhu Yun didn't talk nonsense and directly reported his name. "Wait a minute, don't let me beat you until you cry and go home to your mother to drink milk." Zheng Guan casually threw the elixir into his mouth and made a sarcastic comment, which immediately aroused laughter from the audience. Even they didn't dare to come up. At this young age, this boy really didn't know how to write the word death. "Little baby, go home and play in the mud. Yeah, don't cry later. Hey, I want to see how we monks cry." Hearing these words, Zhu Yun tilted his neck and said unceremoniously, "You don't even dare to come up, and you still dare to laugh at me? If you have the guts, come up and show me some signs later." As soon as these words came out, there was a sudden silence under the A-shaped arena. And the deacon who was the referee couldn't help but look at Zhu Yun one more time. This boy has an unusual temperament. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 18. But before the deacon finished sighing, the fellow disciples on the stage exploded again with a bang. Someone shouted, "Little kid! What are you talking about here? Wait until you can beat senior brother Zheng Guan. He just knows that he can't beat senior brother Zheng, so he brags about himself like this. This kid is too arrogant. I don't care whether he can win or not. Even if he loses, I will find him to compete." Hearing these people shouting, Zhu Yun ignored them at all. He knew from a young age that a biting dog doesn't bark. He stared at Zheng Guan, who was recovering with his eyes. He had already held a fireball talisman in his mind. Although this fireball talisman is not made of fire spirit power, if it is used in a sneak attack, it will achieve some miraculous effects. Not to mention, this is the only means Zhu Yun can use at present. In mid-air, Elder Wan also noticed the movement here. He flew towards the side with his sword, causing the exclamations of all the disciples under the stage. To be able to control the flying sword so steadily, this must be a senior who has reached the 6th level of foundation building. Zheng Guan also suddenly opened his eyes at this moment, and was slightly excited. Even the patrolling elders came to see me. If I perform better, I might be able to fly into the sky. Little brat, don't blame me for treating you as a stepping stone, he said secretly in his heart, pretending that he did not notice Elder Wan in the air, but looked straight ahead and said to the deacon, Sir Deacon, I'm ready. The deacon nodded, then stepped aside and shouted, the fight begins. As soon as the voice fell, Zheng Guan grinned and rushed towards Zuyun with sword steps. So fast. When watching from the audience, Zuyun did not realize it. When he really faced Zheng Guan head-on, he realized that Zheng Guan's speed was beyond his expectations. But after the Battle of Magian Cliff, Zuyun was calm. He also used his body skills. He slid sideways and dodged Zheng Guan's attack at the critical moment. What? What just happened? Everyone in the audience was shocked. Someone actually dodged Zheng Guan's sword steps? Even the deacon was surprised. He found that Zuyun didn't even condense his spiritual power, and thought he was scared. When he was about to save his life, he didn't expect Zuyun to dodge so suddenly. It seems that he used the body movement of an ordinary warrior. Could this kid still be a warrior before entering the Spirit Sword sect? Good boy, you can run so fast. But, if you can run on the first day, can you run on the 15th? No matter where you are, the rules of the ring competition are that either one party surrenders or the other party is knocked off the ring. Zheng Guan saw that Zuyun didn't dare to take his sword moves, and he was even more disdainful in his heart. Can you escape my second sword? Thinking that there were elders watching from above, Zheng Guan couldn't help showing off. He actually condensed 30% of his spiritual power directly onto the magic sword in his hand. For a moment, spiritual power rose up, and a strong pressure surged towards Zuyun. At this time, the deacon hurriedly said, Zheng Guan, although killing is not prohibited in the sect competition, it is a competition after all, so stop when it's over. To be honest, he likes Zuyun very much. He doesn't want Zuyun to die in the sect competition. Such a smart boy, even if he has 4 spiritual roots, I'm afraid he will achieve extraordinary achievements in the future. Of course, in his mind, extraordinary is at most the peak of chi refining. It's too late to say it. As soon as the deacon finished speaking, Zheng Guan smiled and rushed up. The light words were left there, I will show mercy. The deacon looked over and saw that the black light was flowing on the sword of Zheng Guan, and it was obvious that all the spiritual power was concentrated under the tip of the sword. Combined with his sword steps, even if the sword did not hit Zuyun, the airflow generated would probably blow Zuyun away. He shook his head secretly. This kid seemed to lose. And the people in the audience laughed and said, little kid, come to my senior brother later. I just brought a handkerchief so you can wipe your tears. Ha ha ha, senior brother Wu, aren't you afraid that this kid will cry and snot? Tears and snot are okay, I'm afraid that this kid will be beaten by senior brother Zheng and P and shit. Just as everyone was laughing, Zuyun dodged and moved, and in the blink of an eye, he actually jumped and appeared behind Zheng Guan. Suddenly, the laughter of these people stopped abruptly, as if there was something stuck in their throats, and the place suddenly became quiet. But Zuyun's eyes flashed with brilliance. At this time, Zheng Guan was moving forward with all his strength, and he would probably stop and turn around in the next step. If he waited until then, he would not have this good opportunity. Zuyun did not hesitate, and the fireball talisman he was holding was instantly released. With the flames, a fist-like fireball flew quickly towards Zheng Guan. This kid doesn't use a sword, but uses fairy arts. What kind of bullshit fairy arts? It's obviously the most basic fireball arts. Ha ha ha, this fireball won't be split by brother Zheng Guan's sword. The audience was in an uproar again, but only the deacon saw it most clearly. This is a primary talisman, a fireball talisman. The lethality is just bullying mortal warriors. He couldn't help shaking his head, thinking that Zuyun had made a wrong decision. If he had just drawn out the long sword hanging at his waist to attack, Zheng Guan would probably have suffered a loss. Guan Zheng didn't know what was happening at this time. Instead, he heard the laughter of everyone in the audience and thought that Zuyun was inexperienced and had used some stupid trick. He was originally surprised that Zuyun could dodge his blow again, but he couldn't help but put it aside. At the same time, he took a few steps forward, intending to relieve some of his strength before standing firm. But at this time, the fireball hit Zheng Guan on the back with a bang. Fireball talisman. Feeling the warmth coming from behind, Zheng Guan burst into laughter. No wonder everyone in the audience laughed at that kid. If I were in the audience, I would only laugh louder. Even my protective clothing can't be burned. However, before he could put away his smile, the explosion caused by the fireball hitting his back brought a push, making him take a few more steps. Zheng Guan didn't think much about it. At this time, his mind was full of thinking about what gorgeous sword moves he would use to defeat Zuyun and win the favor of the Elder in the sky. However, the laughter in the audience gradually stopped and turned into exclamations. He did not focus on his feet. Instead, he turned his head and looked in the direction behind him, thinking that Zuyun was sneaking up on him. But Zuyun just smiled lightly, which made him feel a little weird. Just when he was puzzled, Zheng Guan's foot suddenly stepped on the air. Unexpectedly, he had no time to react. He had already dropped all his defenses, but Zuyun's idea was to use his strength to push him out of the ring. By the time he figured it out, he had already fallen down and fell on all fours. This time, there was a sudden silence on this side of the arena. In their opinion, it wasn't Zheng Guan's back that was burned just now, but his brain, right? He actually walked off the ring by himself? I wish Yun victory in this battle. The deacon's indifferent voice sounded, and everyone came back to their senses in shock. This kid actually won? I don't accept it, this guy is cheating. Zheng Guan fell face down to the ground. At this time, he stood up with all his strength, not caring to wipe the plaster off his face. Coupled with that expression, it was extremely ridiculous. Guanzhang. The deacon shouted coldly and said, let's not talk about whether Zuyun cheated. Even if he cheated, do the rules of the arena say that cheating is not allowed? In the world of immortality, there is intrigue and deception. If you underestimate your opponent, this is what you have to pay. The price. Zuyun couldn't help but glance at the deacon, these words touched his heart. But he didn't even use a sword. Guanzhang felt unwilling and held back another sentence. Everyone in the audience also agreed, that's right, our Lingjian sect doesn't use swords, so what else do we call Lingjian sect? That's right, even if Zuyun wins with the fireball technique, it's not fair and square. This fireball technique is nothing more than a basic spell, it is something that cannot be put on the stage. The deacon waited coldly for everyone to finish, and then sarcastically said, if you think so, then you can just go home and farm. What else can you do to become an immortal? There is no one who is first in swordsmanship, and no one second in skill. As long as you can win, this is the best policy. If you encounter an enemy someday and see him holding a sword, do you think he is a swordsman? Looking around, seeing that everyone seemed to be deep in thought, the deacon continued to turn to look at Guanzhang. Guanzhang, you are arrogant and that is the only reason for your defeat. Also, what Zuyun used was not the fireball technique, but the talisman. Our Lingjian sect has a talisman hall, and you can receive 5 Zhang Junior talisman, have you ever gone to get it? The speaker has no intention, the listener has intention. Zuyun had a vague idea in his mind. Since Lingjian sect has a talisman hall, can he fish in troubled waters with his own fireball talisman? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 19. He temporarily suppressed this thought in his heart. At present, Zuyun still needs to defend the ring. Before coming, he didn't know the rules of the fight. Now he has a general understanding. The winner defends the ring and accepts the challenge of others. The winner continues to defend, and the loser has no chance to challenge again. In order to avoid the occurrence of round-robin battles, the defender only needs to win 3 games in a row, which can be regarded as direct promotion. Originally, those who were afraid to go on stage by Zheng Guan's sword steps on the Jiazu ring were eager to try. Although they looked down on Zuyun's methods, after the deacon's guidance, they all began to think about whether they were sure to win. From the battle between Zuyun and Zheng Guan. Although Zheng Guan failed because of carelessness, the body skills that Zuyun just showed were not solved by them for a while. If they went on stage, they would definitely learn Zheng Guan's way to attack. But the result must be exactly the same as Zheng Guan. Just as everyone was thinking hard, the deacon interrupted their thoughts with a cold shout. If there is no one left, the winner of the A-shaped arena will be Zuyun. After that, the deacon no longer paid attention to everyone, but said to Zuyun with a pleasant face, "Little boy, this pill is for you." Zuyun had no spiritual power to consume, and when he took the pill, he subconsciously wanted to return it. But after thinking about it, he asked again, "Sir Deacon, can I not eat this pill?" Not eat it? The deacon was stunned. He had been a referee countless times in the Spirit Sword sect, but this was the first time he saw such a request. Thinking that this kid was really hard to figure out, he simply smiled and said, "It doesn't matter, if you don't want to eat it, just keep it. However, if you can't use your spiritual power to fight, don't complain about yourself." Zuyun understands. Zuyun bowed his hands to thank him, but his mind became a little active. Now that these people don't dare to come up, won't I earn 2 less pills? With a turn of his eyes, he said to the person who was the most shouting before, "Were you the one who shouted the loudest just now? Come on, and see who can beat the other and cry and go home to find milk." Such young men, who have just entered the sect, are all newborn calves who are not afraid of tigers. From ordinary kids, they ascended to heaven in one step and entered the immortal gate. They all felt that they could cultivate the great way. How could they bear such provocation from Zuyun? Especially the young man who was named by Zuyun in public was 3 years older than Zuyun. If he didn't go on stage, could he still hold his head up in the Spirit Sword sect in the future? "Good boy, see how I beat the shit out of you." The young man was only afraid of Zheng Guan, but not Zuyun. He immediately drew out the long sword at his waist and made the starting gesture of the sword control technique, saying, "My name is Li Heng. If you lose, don't say that I bullied you for not taking pills." Zuyun did consume a trace of spiritual power. But that was only used on the fireball talisman. Otherwise, with his ability, how could he throw the talisman accurately and fiercely? He, Zuyun chuckled, his eyes moved slightly, and said, "Brother Li Heng, I left this pill for you." As he said that, he spread his hands, and the chi combining pill rolled back and forth in Zuyun's small palm for a few times, and then stopped. "Give it to me? What, do you know how powerful I am? Do you want to surrender?" Li Heng's eyes were locked on the chi combining pill, and he swallowed a bellyful of saliva. The teenagers fighting in the lower half are all ordinary disciples. Chi combining pill? If you want it, you have to exchange it with contributions. No, doesn't brother Li Heng think that he will definitely beat me, Zuyun? In this case, then take out some prizes to help cheer up. After that, he turned to the deacon and said, "Sir Deacon, I wonder if this is legal." The deacon knew in his heart that this time, Zuyun was estimated to win again. But as for the rules, the sect really hasn't set such rules, so he said, if the sect doesn't prohibit it, then you can do it. Li Hong blushed and whispered, it's okay to bet, but I can't produce an elixir that is equivalent to it. People like them, at most, have some spiritual pills that can temporarily increase spiritual power, or bigo pills that can fill the stomach. Where can there be such elixirs that can really help with cultivation? Zuyun just figured it out, and he really didn't have anything else to bet on. It doesn't matter whether it's equal or not, Zuyun smiled evilly and said, I see that senior brother Li's sword is not bad, why don't you bet on it? Sword? Not bad. Hearing this, everyone's faces suddenly became strange. Because Li Hong's sword was distributed by the sect. On the day of registration, you can get this low-grade magic sword. There is also a sword control technique. Even the deacon was very surprised. This kid's thoughts are really hard to figure out. Brother Li, if you don't want to bet a sword for the Heki pill, then come down and let me go up. Yes, Li Hong, if I had known that Zuyun was going to bet on the Heki pill, I would have borrowed 2 or 3 swords, not to mention 1 sword. That's right, if you don't want to bet, then give the opportunity to the other brothers. The audience shouted one after another, which made Li Hong feel that Zuyun seemed to be giving the Heki pill. Thinking of this, he said seriously, okay, let's bet. Zuyun was overjoyed and said to the deacon, please be a witness, Mr. Deacon. I am very grateful. The deacon chuckled and said, okay. But don't lose the fight, or the saved Heki pill will be gone. Zuyun thanks the deacon first. Zuyun bowed his hands to express his gratitude, then turned around and said with a smile, Brother Li, I'll leave this Heki pill here. See if you have the ability to take it. After the words fell, the deacon also shouted that the duel had begun. At this moment, Li Hong's mind was all on the Heki pill. If he had one of these pills, it would be like having an extra life when he was out on a mission. The most common cause of death among cultivators is the exhaustion of spiritual power and the crisis again. The Heki pill can restore all spiritual power in a cup of tea. A trace of greed flashed in his eyes, and he danced several sword flowers and covered Zuyun. However, in Zuyun's eyes, these were like floating clouds. He didn't give Li Hong a chance to get close to him at all, and dodged away. Humph, want to repeat the same trick? I'm not a fool like Zheng Guan. Li Hong was rough but meticulous, and he kept some strength when he made a move. He made a plan, and if there was no absolute chance, he would not use his full strength. He kept his eyes on Zuyun and chased after him slowly. In addition to preventing Zuyun from suddenly throwing a fireball talisman, he also had to prevent Zuyun from leaving his sight. He danced with sword flowers and kept approaching. But every time he was about to force Zuyun into a corner, Zuyun would slip away from an unexpected angle. The audience began to curse, saying that Zuyun only knew how to run away. How could this be a fight? On the contrary, the deacon's eyes flashed, as if he knew what Zuyun was thinking. This kid, after running for so long, didn't even use up a bit of spiritual power. On the contrary, Li Hong's breath became heavier. If he continued to use sword moves, he might be exhausted and defeated. As expected. After a cup of tea, Li Hong's sword flowers suddenly stagnated, and the speed quickly slowed down. He realized that the spiritual power in his body was less than 10%. And he didn't hurt Zuyun at all. Zuyun always paid attention to Li Hong's reaction, and he knew his chance had come. He simply stopped his movements, put his hands on his waist and laughed, Brother Li Hong, come on, why are you out of strength? Why can't you last so long? Zuyun, you're looking for death. Li Hong was irritable, and was provoked by Zuyun. He immediately gritted his teeth and fiercely danced a sword flower with a wider range, covering Zuyun. However, Zhu Yun easily dodged, looked at Li Heng with a smile and said, "Brother Li, are you going to walk down the ring by yourself, or do you want me to send you off?" "What do you mean?" Li Heng was stunned, and suddenly became angry. Seeing that Zhu Yun was so close to him at this time, he raised his hand and stabbed the sword out. But he didn't know that the sword flower just now had exhausted all his spiritual power. The sword was only halfway stabbed, and it was crooked, and there was no strength at all. Zhu Yun saw it clearly, and gathered a trace of spiritual power on 2 fingers, easily clamping the attacking long sword. It seems that senior brother has admitted defeat, so he wants to send the sword over. After saying that, he exerted a little force. How could Li Heng, who had lost his spiritual power, be a match for Zhu Yun at this time? Zhu Yun not only took the sword, but also threw Li Heng more than 10 steps away, and threw him directly outside the ring. This round, Zhu Yun wins. The voice of the deacon sounded at the right time. But he didn't finish his words. "If Zhu Yun wins another game, you will all be eliminated." As soon as these words came out, the people in the audience were in chaos. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 20. No one wanted to be eliminated, and yet Zhu Yun, a young boy, came out on top. But everyone wants to come up, thinking that they can definitely shoot down Zhu Yun. Can be biased. And no one is convinced. Quiet. At this time, the deacon said coldly, "I asked you to come up at first, but none of you can come up. Now you are rushing to come up. Is it true that in a sect competition, you can come if you want, but if you don't want to, you can't come?" Hearing the deacon's anger, everyone suddenly shivered and felt unwilling. But how could they dare to talk back to the deacon? The third choice will be made by this deacon. The one with the highest level among you will come up. Do you have any doubts? I saw the deacon looking around. Wherever his eyes went, everyone avoided them, not daring to look at each other. Indeed, the suggestion made by the deacon is reasonable and reasonable. Among us, the one with the highest level should be senior brother Yu at the third level of Qi refining, right? What, senior brother Yu is also in our A-shaped arena. Senior brother Yu has devoted himself to cultivation, but within 3 years he has reached the third level of Qi refining. The lower half are those who entered the program within 3 years. Being able to practice to the third level of Qi refining is considered extremely fast. Therefore, ordinary teenagers need to complete tasks in exchange for training resources. There is no way to concentrate on practicing. Only those with 3 spiritual roots and above will receive resources from the sect. It's like a big dog and a second dog. To put it bluntly, Xianxia is just a higher level handyman. And if Zhang Tianyuan hadn't brought Zhu Yun's 5 spiritual roots, he would have had Sun Suanhua. If you want to stay, you can only work as a handyman in the field, doing farm chores, boiling water, and cooking. Now that the deacon has spoken, if I, Yu Qingtian, don't come, it would be really shameless. While talking, a lazy voice came from outside the crowd. It turns out that this so-called senior brother Yu has been sitting on the outside practicing. Zhu Yun couldn't help but frown. Not to mention the third level of Qi refining. What's more, Yu Qingtian's unique momentum makes him not so easy to deal with. Could it be that the sect competition I participated in is over? Yu Qingtian moved, passed through the crowd like a shadow, and jumped onto the ring. I've met Master Deacon, disciple Yu Qingtian. The deacon nodded slightly, then turned around and threw another Heki pill to Zhu Yun, saying, "Will you swallow it this time?" Zhu Yun took it and shook his head. "Thank you, Mr. Deacon. Since you don't want to take it, let's start." After saying that, he didn't talk nonsense and stepped aside directly. Yu Qingtian did not take action directly. Instead, he looked Zhu Yun up and down and said, "Junior brother, what do you call me?" Zuyun held a fireball talisman with both hands and said without moving, "Zuyun. So you are the playmate that junior brother Joe mentioned." Yu Qingtian looked stunned, patted his forehead, and said, "That kid kept telling me how powerful you are. Originally, I thought the 5 spiritual roots were so powerful, but you can stand up and let me come up here, you must have some skills." These words, as if there were no one around, shocked everyone in the audience. Especially Zheng Guan and Li Heng were even more ashamed. They were defeated by a person with 5 spiritual roots. "Junior brother Zhou, are you talking about Zhou Huanghua?" Zuyun secretly felt that something was wrong. Although in the barren stone mountain, Big Go and Ergo were both a little bigger than Zuyun. But when they usually play in the mountains, they always listen to Zuyun. Just because Zuyun Naogwazi was smart, bold, and careful, they admired him endlessly. Unexpectedly, when he arrived at the Lingjian sect, Ergu actually told others how he was doing. "Normally, when I see you, I can't even hold in my fart for a long time. I just follow the big dog and say that I am the same." Zuyun was a little angry in his heart. His father usually taught that talking too much will lead to mistakes, especially after arriving here for the first time. Coupled with knowing the cruelty of the world of immortality, Zuyun became more cautious. "Well, of course it's Zhou Huanghua." Yu Qingtian smiled easily, took out a porcelain bottle from his arms, and poured 2 Heki pills into his hand. "I thought I heard just now, you take Heki pills. Dan makes bets with others, why don't you make a bet with me?" As he spoke, he took out a porcelain bottle from his pocket and poured out 2 Heki pills. Zuyun's breathing became slightly heavier. "Am I not here just for the resources for cultivation?" He had taken the Heki pill, which was one that Sun Suanhua squeezed out through some unknown method. If you want to continue practicing in the future, it is obviously unreliable to rely on your own master. You have to fight for everything by yourself. With a sharp look in his eyes, Zuyun took out the 2 Heki pills from his body, but did not agree directly. Instead, he said, "Senior brother Yu, this sword is quite good, how about, add it to it too?" Yu Qingchen was stunned for a moment, then laughed loudly, "Good boy, you want to bet on my sword? Do you think my sword is a standard magic sword sent by the sect?" The implication is that Zuyun can't come up with the corresponding things to bet with him. "It's not yours, and neither is mine." Zuyun touched his waist and also took out a low-grade magic sword. "Excuse me, Mr. Deacon, look at my sword. What's the difference?" What Zuyun took out was the low-grade magic sword given by Elder Wan. There are many types of low-grade magical instruments. For someone like the Spirit Sword sect who would give you a sword upon entering the mountain gate, it would naturally not be a good thing. And some magic weapons carefully crafted by weapon refiners, even if they are both low-grade, have different powers. Just like the golden sword that Sun Suanhua originally gave to Zuyun, it was made of many high-quality materials. That was the first magic weapon made by Sun Suanhua 100 years ago. Hey, there is a 10,000 character on the hilt of this sword. The deacon is naturally a discerning person. As soon as he got the magic sword, he immediately noticed the difference. After taking a closer look, I realized that this sword actually came from Wanjian Mountain. Yu Qingtian, Zuyun's sword, is no worse than yours. The deacon recovered his thoughts, raised his head and said. Yu Qingtian was stunned for a moment, but since the deacon said it in public, you have to believe it if you don't believe it. In that case, let's get started. As he spoke, he straightened his sword and assumed a posture that was completely different from the starting position of the sword control technique. Senior brother Yu is using the sword technique passed down by Elder Mu. Someone exclaimed. Little baby, hold on to your sword. The deacon called out softly, signaling Zuyun to take the sword back, but he quietly glanced at the top of his head from the corner of his eyes. A person with 5 spiritual roots can actually obtain Elder Wan's sword. Could it be that his talent for swords is extraordinary? Elder Wan was still floating in the air, but at this time, he did not notice this place, but looked at the upper half of the area where the fighting became more intense. That is the place where the strength of the juniors of the Spirit Sword sect can truly be seen. Deacon, please help me keep it safe, I'm afraid it will get in the way. Zuyun already has a long sword on his body, which he won from Li Zhou. If he was really forced to use his sword energy, he believed that he only needed one sword to determine the outcome. However, Zuyun would not use this trick unless absolutely necessary. Arrogant. Hearing this, Yu Qingtian's face suddenly turned cold. It would be fine if someone at the same level as him said so, but Zuyun, a five-spirited person who had just entered the sect for less than a month, dared to say that it was in his way? Unconsciously, Yu Qingtian was angered. He stood there and stabbed out with his sword. It's like a move that unleashes sword energy, but it's just similar in form but not in spirit. A line of light green sword energy, like a vine that was spawned, stretched rapidly towards Zuyun. I saw it, Elder Mu's unique skill, the wood spirit sword technique. Yes, this sword technique is used to trap people first. When the time comes, then Zuboi will be the fish on the catfish board, ready to be slaughtered by others. Everyone exclaimed in unison. They could recognize this kind of swordsmanship the first time they saw it. Zuyun's figure quickly retreated. But he found that the vine was following him. Even if he can't catch up with Zuyun at this time, depending on his third level of chi refining, he may have enough spiritual power to cover the entire arena. Zuyun dodged while thinking. If you use the fireball talisman to smash it? But Yu Qingtian kept standing in place. And this fireball talisman is not the kind filled with my own fire spiritual power. Even Li Hong's clothes can't be burned, so what's the use? You know, these talismans are placed in the talisman hall, and almost no one picks them up. What to do? Could it be that we can only use spiritual power? But I am only at the second level of chi refining. How can I beat the third level of chi refining with my spiritual power alone? Moreover, there are no means, and the master has made it clear that he will not use the sword control technique. Wait, why did I use the fireball talisman to hit Yu Qingtian? Thinking of this, Zuyun quickly took out all 4 fireball talismans from his arms.